All right, I have some good news and some bad news. I'll start with the bad news, because that's what we do, right? The bad news is I have no PowerPoint, so you just have to look at me the whole time. The good news is it's going to be short, so hopefully we can still get out of here on time. Now, I think the reason why we often, when we have good news and bad news, tell the bad news first, because we want to get it out of the way, and we want to end on a good note. Nobody likes to hear bad news, but even more so, having to be the person to deliver the bad news is pretty rough. You might find yourself the object of rage or worse. We often use the phrase, "Don't shoot the messenger, but," and then deliver something that maybe the person doesn't want to hear. Now, can you imagine not doing that just for somebody you know, but doing that for the king, the most powerful person in the land, someone who you know has done and probably will do some pretty terrible things? Well, that's Nathan's story. We heard about part of David's story during the children's time, which was perfect, because now I can talk about Nathan, the prophet that accompanied David. And especially during David's, well, let's just call it his troublesome era. Now, Nathan was a prophet of God, a prophet to David. We often fear prophets, but I don't think we need to. But I think the reason why we often fear prophets is because internally we know that we're not perfect. We're very aware of all of our imperfections, everything that doesn't feel quite right about us. And we sometimes carry that as shame, thinking, I'm bad. But that's not what God sees. When God looks at us, God has a different view. God's view of us is one of love and of grace and of hope. So God provides people to help us move on from that place of shame to somewhere better. And I think that's what prophets are. Prophets don't just bring doom and gloom. That's often our ego interpreting their words of challenge to feel like it's a personal attack. Instead, I think the real role of the prophet is to see and to speak of something different, the way it could go. I think their ultimate goal is to say, we can do better. And their message of hope says, it doesn't have to be like this. And so Nathan comes as a prophet to David. Now, there's a story where we see Nathan and David really get into it. It actually comes after our text that we heard today, where the problematic David took a married woman for himself and had her husband killed. Now, as I said, this happened after the text that we heard today, this covenant that God makes with David to provide a family line, to provide a connection. Covenants are not a guarantee that things will go a certain way. God covenanted with David, and David then made some poor choices. But what is important for us to see in that is that no matter the circumstances of life, a covenant is a promise of faithfulness. In plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, as long as we both shall live. Right? Now, David certainly pushes the boundaries of these with God, but God remains faithful and extends grace to David to continue this covenant, to continue this relationship. And in many ways, it's not just God making a covenant with David, it's God making a covenant with all of humanity through David. Many of the biblical characters that we encounter, especially those like the kings, the priests, the prophets, they represent the whole community. Covenanting with them is a way of covenanting with all people. And covenants always come with a sign. We often have a sign like this tree this year and other things we've done in years past. They are signs of the covenant. Covenants do not come with punishments or threats. They come with reminders. They come with something baked in to remind us and maintain that connection. And a prophet's role is to help us keep on track, to keep listening and keep digging into what that covenant provides for us. But covenants often call us to do things that we might not want to do or might not come naturally to us. They're good things, but they're also hard things. Good and hard are not mutually exclusive. And that's why we need prophets. Now, there are prophets among us, in this room, in our world, and they're not just a group of weirdos. They are the people that God places in our lives to help us. In our times of hurt, times of healing, and times of growth, we can often be consumed with ourselves. Prophets are those who help us look beyond ourselves. Not that our individual situations and feelings and struggles aren't important, but I think it's like a balancing act. If we're too fixated on ourselves, we can become selfish. If we're too fixated on others, we can become resentful because we are caring for them and no one is caring for us. Or we can be burned out because we're not taking care of our own needs. Prophets come into our lives to help us find a good balance and to orient us towards goodness and justice. And so we must consider, what are the things that God is calling us to? These are the words of the prophets. We can think of our becoming statements. These are prophetic words of hope and of meaning of who we want to be, who we see through God's vision we can be as a congregation. And our congregational review helps with that, helps us to engage with those to say, how far along are we? Are we getting there? Do we need to do more? Do we need to do less? Do we need to adjust our focus? Another question I ponder is, how can we respond to things around us in a Christ-like way? I have this memory from when I was in seminary. It was the 10th year anniversary from 9/11. And my professor said, he wrote this question on the board. He said, what were our options on 9/11? Now, we went out and named a bunch of things, of different things that we could do, and he wrote them on kind of two sides of the board. And we were trying to figure out, okay, why is he doing this? And then he showed us the word "our" in that. What are our options? Is a crucial part of understanding what that question is getting at. If we answer that question as what were our options as a nation versus what are our options as followers of Jesus, might take a very different, might form a very different response. This is why we've been doing prayers on Tuesday evenings, leading up to and including the election day in the United States. Because we know that this is an important time in the life of us and in our country. But we have to think about what our calling is in the midst of that. As people of God, as followers of Jesus, we feel called towards prayer. We may also feel called towards other actions that line up with our faith, but we have chosen as a community to enter into prayer. And I'll again invite you to join us for those.